What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Doc and Dog, presented by the Fantasy Mafia. My name is Jordan Jaika, aka Dr. Fantasy, and I am here with my co host Rydawg, and we are very excited to continue talking about the MLB season. In this episode, we're going to dive into some more specifics in terms of players that we're targeting, some winners and losers from the new shortened season overall. So, we'll hop right into it today. I will not delay. So to kick it off, I first one thing I wanted to talk about just a few winners and losers that I had in terms of trends that I see. So the first thing, and we mentioned this kind of briefly in the last episode, is I'm a little disappointed that we're not going to get to see too many rookie breakouts. I think you're going to see, number one, probably not as many rookies get called up. And there's nothing more exciting, and I've witnessed a few of them in person, than a rookie making their major league debut, especially for fan bases, like the Tigers, for example, that have really struggled for a while. They're going to have some really exciting major league debuts because it's almost the start of a new era in their franchise, hopefully, anyway. So there's a lot of hope in the air. So, I mean, I love rookie debuts. And I mean, from a fantasy standpoint, you can see rookies that catch fire. But overall, there's a lot of up and downs that rookies go through during the course of their first season. So I'm not necessarily targeting rookies in fantasy drafts this year, and I think it's overall disappointing to see a lack of major league debuts and not getting to see a rookie develop and get into a full groove because 60 games is not nearly enough for them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think even like the younger stars, I'm not really targeting this year, like the Rafael Devers, the Acunas, the Sotos, whoever. I mean, 60 games, and those guys are very young, and it usually takes, I'm not going to say it takes young guys a while to get into a rhythm because typically that's all players. It takes a while for them to get hot or get into a rhythm. But I think with the veterans like the Starling Martes, the JD Martinez's, the Nolan Arenados, the Trout, the Yelich's, etc. Those type of guys have been doing it for a while now, so they have the veteran experience. So, like, I guess they could really adjust their game more than any other players. I guess would since they have, they have the experience, they have the time logged in. So I think those are the type of guys that I would target the first couple rounds just based off time in the trade.
Yeah, and I would agree that, and it's kind of funny because that's not normally my style. I like targeting upside players and value guys, and some of those veteran players do provide value. But yeah, I mean, I agree, especially if you're in a redraft league in those first few rounds, or if you're drafted already and you're looking at trade targets. Yeah, I mean, definitely target those veteran guys. I don't mind some of the upside guys because you need to have some upside in your lineup. In my opinion,
Yeah.
still if you do want to win. But yeah, I mean, I'd agree. Like I love Devers, but if he's your second or third round pick, I mean that's a little tougher for me to validate. Normally, I'd be all for it because I love Devers and think he's going to be a consensus first round pick in the next few years here, just because I love his offensive talent so much. But right now, it's hard to validate that. So yeah, I agree with you actually, and it kind of goes against my normal strategy. So, other winners and losers just in general, I think NL teams, we're going to see a huge change in philosophy. In
Mm-hmm.
those teams that have offensive depth, obviously with the addition of the universal DH, it's going to be a whole new ball game for them. I would say a little less strategy, honestly. There's a lot of strategy in terms of pinch hitting for the pitcher and even lineup configuration when you have a pitcher in the lineup. So it's a whole new ball game for NL teams, and even a team like the Mets. They weren't sure what they were going to do for Yoenis Cespedes, and he's going to get an opportunity most likely to DH. And I'm not overly optimistic. He's had so many injuries over the last few years, but there's a lot of other teams that are in the same situation as the Mets. So I think that NL teams specifically with offensive depth, are going to have a huge advantage.
I agree, and I think another winners I'll touch up briefly is the Yankees because they had Judge, they had Stanton, they had Paxton, they had those three guys out. If the season were to start, the first of it when it was supposed to start, all three of those guys were supposed to be out. Severino was also went to undergo Tommy John. I think during the off season, like right before the season started, I believe he actually underwent it the first week of spring training.
Yep.
So he's definitely a winner in that aspect too, since he kind of had like a half a season to basically recuperate. but Stanton, Judge, and Paxton are all going to be healthy. So, I mean, all those people that avoided Stanton, and if those leagues still like are alive today, those redraft leagues that happened before, and all those people that took Stanton late with his ADP because they're afraid of injuries, those guys are definitely the winners because I think Stanton's just going to absolutely crush the ball this year. 60 games, he's healthy, he's definitely going to eat. And not to mention Ohtani, one of my personal favorites. If he falls at the right ADP, I'll draft him. He's one of those young guys that we talk about, but for him as a player, not from a fantasy standpoint, more so from a regular baseball standpoint, he's gonna be able to pitch on time now, as opposed to when the season was supposed to start, he was supposed to miss the first couple months. So I think the Angels and the Yankees are definitely winners in this, and I think Justin Upton's a winner too because he was also another guy on the Angels that was hurt last year, didn't get much time, but now he has all that extra time to recuperate and get himself healthy.
Yeah, and kind of going along the winners and losers of teams as a whole. One of the ones that I kind of have is the Astros. I mean, a lot of people were concerned going into the season how after the cheating scandal, how fans were going to react to the Astros. I mean, they don't have to worry about that now. And for the Astros, who are a very talented team, as silly as that may seem, I mean, they're not going to have to deal with all the boos and the negative crowd noise. They can just focus on playing the game. Now, don't get me wrong, in 2021, or whenever we see a full season with fans, they're going to hear it. But for this season, at least, they can kind of get just back into a normal rhythm of baseball without worrying about that outside noise. So I think that's an interesting thing to track. Another winner that I have, or just bubble teams in general, and I kind of mentioned this in our last episode briefly, but a 60-game season is really so unpredictable. I mean, a team that we're not expecting could go on a really hot 20-game streak, and they could make the playoffs because of it. And we see teams every year that finish 30 games below 500. I mean, they still go through streaks where they win some games. So, I mean, what's not to say if the Marlins go through a hot 20-game stretch, just based off of that, they could make the playoffs. And that's bizarre to think, and it goes the opposite way for a team like the Dodgers. And I think there's a lot of pressure on the Dodgers in general just because they're so talented. They've come so close to winning so many times, but they still don't have that championship. And they were the most dominant team of the 2010s, and they walked away with no championship. So I think there's a lot of pressure on them. And realistically, though, if they go into a 10-game stretch where they struggle, they could miss the playoffs based on that. So I would say some of those top-end teams could be potential losers if they start off slow. And on the opposite end, some of those bubble teams are teams we're not really expecting much from. I know a lot of people have pointed to the Padres, a very young team with a lot of promise who, maybe we expected them to be right around a 500 team. But if they go through a hot stretch, what's not to say the Padres couldn't make a run?
I would agree with that. And I think the thing with the Astros is you made a good point about the Astros, about the teams, fans possibly not being able to be in the stadiums. But what about the pitchers that are going to be pitching that have came out publicly and said that they're going to beam them? Guys like Trevor Bauer and guys like Mike Clevenger. And Clevenger really went on he's actually another winner now that you think about it, because Clevenger is actually supposed to miss a month and a half a season, and now he's ready. He's ready to beam those Astro players, I guess. So, I mean, I'm curious to see the penalties that would happen, not only from, COVID, from, the whole, we discussed this in a previous pod, spitting, licking your hand and spitting on the ground or licking your baseball or whatever. But, going from all right, what happens if, the Astros still have a lot of heat on their shoulders. So what happens if they have Troy Bauer, Walker Buehler, or, all the teams the Astros have screwed over, or Clevenger, what happens if they beam Altuve or Bregman? I mean, that's definitely going to be very interesting to see.
And there's going to be a lot of eyes on the season, too, with fans not being allowed to physically attend the games. I mean, I'm assuming there's going to be a decent TV viewership for a lot of these games that baseball hasn't really seen, just because season ticket holders that would normally be going to the game are most likely going to be watching on TV. So, yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of eyes on baseball, especially with not a lot of sports going on and people anticipating it so much. But I'll dive into a few specific players that I like. You brought up Mike Clevenger. Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. And I did a few drafts a month or two ago where he was falling into the 10th, 11th, 12th round based on his injury. I mean, if you're drafting now, I mean, you can fire him up as He before that was going as a fifth, sixth, seventh, maybe that's a little late, but right around there pick, right around Giolito and Castillo,
Mm-hmm.
those young upside guys. But I mean, Clevenger has an opportunity to win a Cy Young in a shortened season, especially he struggled with injuries. So he doesn't have to worry about pitching 200 innings this year. I mean, he's probably going to get 12 starts maybe. So maybe we're looking at 60, 70, 80 innings pitched, somewhere in that range for him. And I mean, he can be an absolutely dominating force. So yeah, I was trying to target him a few months ago just in case the season did start. I really wanted him in as many leagues as possible. But yeah, I mean, he's ready to go. I was looking for news on him before we started recording this, and he said he's ready to go. And he was expected like mid-May, and we're pushing season starting in July, late July. So I mean, that's 2 months later than he was expecting. So he's ready to go, and I expect big things from him. And like I said, he would be one of my contenders to win the Cy Young.
Oh, for sure. And we're going back to the previous pods we've done in the past. I guess you could even make the case that Scherzer is somewhat of a winner. You really think about it, he's had all this time now to rest his back after missing a World Series start. So now he gets the extra 2 to 3 months. I think he could possibly be a winner. I think I'd have to see him pitch, though, to say that he's one of the guys that I think, him being 35, 36 years old, you just would have to see him pitch before you can flat out say, okay, this guy's a winner.
An injury like that too, it can not only is it a concern because it's an injury, but I mean it can mess up your mechanics as a pitcher. And for pitchers, mechanics are everything. So if his back throws off his windup even in the slightest, I mean that has huge implications for his success.
I would agree for sure. Yeah, and I think all those pitchers that went out and got Tommy John, we can touch back on that. Not just Severino that only got Tommy Johns, Chris Sale and Noah Syndergaard are also the notable pitchers that went out and got Tommy John. So those guys are definitely walking out as winners, and those guys should be ready before the second half of 2021 season, I would think.
Yeah, and staying with the theme of pitchers, I'll bring up a few more that I'm kind of excited about. And I was excited about some of these guys beforehand, just for the record. But, there's a lot of young guys who have had injury problems or they really haven't stretched themselves out for a 200 inning season anymore. And they don't have to worry about that anymore. So I'm talking guys like Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow. I mean, these are guys where they're dominant, but you really question if they can pitch 200 innings in a season because we haven't really seen it from them. So, I mean, that's not a concern anymore. I already said that I thought the Rays were going to win the World Series. I think that prediction stands even stronger than it ever has today with a shortened season. Not to mention, the Rays have a very, very deep team and deep pitching staff overall. And they've already experimented with kind of bizarre pitching tactics in the past. And there's no better time to do that than now. And they've already experimented with it. So I still stand very high on the Rays, but I think guys like Snell, Glasnow, who have never really been stretched out, they don't have to be this season. So as much as they were risky picks before, I don't think they offer as much risk anymore. Other names I would throw into that category: Chris Paddock. There was talks about him having a innings limit this year. Same with Zach Gallen from the Diamondbacks. So young guys who, as much as you mentioned before, we're targeting veterans. I would say maybe that applies a little more to offensive players when I really think about it. I still like some of those young upside pitchers who have ability. It was just a question of, do you trust them for a whole fantasy season? And for me, I probably would have said no, but do I trust them for a 60-game season? Yeah, I mean, I definitely do.
Yeah, I think with pitchers, I would agree with you on that. I think with pitchers, they're just as much. Anyone can have a good game because they're all the same. I guess you would think. With pitchers that you trust your mechanics so much, and then the upside would definitely help with a shortened season for a pitcher because the batters can be very well rusty. And I think if anyone has the advantage of this shortened season, it's pitchers. And I would like to touch up on another pitcher that I was saying that I was right about. I guess that would have an advantage of the shortened season would be Luke Weaver. Weaver was definitely a guy that hasn't been stretched out either, and he was dealing with injuries last season and during his time before he got traded from St. Louis. He was involved in that Paul Goldschmidt trade. So I think Luke Weaver is definitely a winner. And I actually had an article on him before the season officially became a 60 game season. So I'm definitely a huge Luke Weaver guy, and I think he is definitely going to take the ball and run with this opportunity.
Yeah, I agree with that. Other names, you already brought these names up previously, but I just want to emphasize it again. It's just the Yankees overall, and a lot of
Yeah.
that stands for their individual players for fantasy. You know, Stanton, Aaron Judge, those are guys that were slipping later and later and later in drafts, and now all of a sudden, you know, they're going to be playing your full fantasy season. James
Yeah.
Paxton as well. Even Gary Sanchez, he had a back injury and we didn't know if he was going to be ready for opening day, but I can tell you with 100% certainty now he will be ready. So, you know, I know a lot of people have kind of been kind of bearish on Gary Sanchez and not loving him because of that injury, but I mean he's ready to go and he's 100% ready. So yeah, I mean as much as the Yankees overall are probably winners for this, they're a very veteran team overall as well.
Yeah.
That should bode well in their favor. But yeah, I mean, from a fantasy standpoint, these guys offered great value, and I think that you'll still see them slip a little bit in fantasy drafts because people are still going to be scared of that injury history. But I'm definitely not as concerned with it for a 60-game season.
Not at all, and I hope they let them slip because those are the guys that are going to be league winners, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there was one league I did a roto draft, probably 2 months ago, and people were so concerned with Stanton and Judge. I ended up getting them in the 12th and 13th rounds, so that was nice.
Nice.
I mean, I probably should have taken them before that, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think another guy I'd like to touch up on. I think some of the, I wouldn't say some, but I think a lot of the veteran outfielders are going to be decent plays as well. Guys like Nick Markakis, Edner, and Sarte from the Braves. I also think, I mean, if we didn't love guys like Donaldson, those veteran third basemen, we definitely love them now. And I think Justin Turner is definitely another name. I mean, I know you're not as high on him as I am, but I love Justin Turner. I mean, he's as injury prone as they get, but I mean, he can definitely pull a 60-game season. So, I mean, I'm definitely eager to see what he's going to do on that field.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned before that Justin Turner never really played above 120 games, but he only has to play 60, so I have confidence in
Uh huh.
that.
I mean, he's going to be another guy. Let's see what happens. I mean, I think he could play 55 games out of 60.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why he couldn't. Another kind of offensive player in that, not exactly in that sphere, but another guy I'll bring up is Kyle Schwarber. And the reason I bring him up is he's always been an offensive force for the Cubs, but he's most likely going to be their primary DH. And I think any of those guys in the NL who have really struggled in the field to find a home that are going to be permanent DH options now are really big winners. And the reason that I say that is when you're able to specialize in one thing, it just takes your game to the next level. You don't have to worry about taking or practicing fielding. You don't have to take fly balls. You don't have to worry about any of that. Just focus on swinging the bat and being as productive offensively as possible. And that's not to say he's never going to take a fly ball, but it's not really as much of a necessity. He can just focus on his craft of being a great hitter, and that's really always been his strength. So I expect guys like that now, and if the universal DH is a thing in the future, to really benefit from that.
Yeah, I would agree for sure. There's a lot of guys that just specify with power hitting. Even Aquino from the Reds, I touched on him briefly before. But I think he's definitely he's gonna really benefit from this 60-game NLDH as well this year.
Yeah, I was thinking back to Aquino when we did our team mini series when we were talking about the Reds, and we said we have no idea where he's going to fit in. They have all these outfielders, and it seemed like he was kind of the odd man out just because he's a terrible defender. So it seemed like he was probably going to start the season in the minors. But I mean, now he's an easy decision to be your DH if you're the Reds.
Oh yeah, you have Aquino and you have Castellanos, you have Senzel, and then you have that other outfielder they got from Japan. So I mean, Shogo. I love me some Shogo. I couldn't remember his name off the top of my head. So, I mean, that's definitely the core right there, I think. And, yeah, I mean, that's going to be a nice team to watch.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. We already mentioned that they're the greatest team on paper. So, I mean, there's no reason that if they don't go on a nice little run, I mean, that's one of those bubble teams where I was pretty confident in, well, not confident, but I had them as one of my wild card teams. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they made a really nice run. And, who knows? You could be looking at a World Series champ there, And like I said, I think the season's going to be very unpredictable. And maybe at the end of that, I'll look at that at the season. I'll look at that statement and say, what was I thinking as the Dodgers win the championship and everything was chalk. But I expect it to be crazy just because normally during the course of the season, it's just such a grind. And like I said,
Mm-hmm.
being a Mets fan, I know all about watching division leads getting blown, and it can come from every angle. There's not going to be an opportunity for teams to blow it, and there's also not going to be an opportunity for teams to make up any ground during the
Yeah.
course of 60 games, and that's one of the disappointing things. And I know there's been talks of them shortening the baseball season, but I mean, I just like that it's different. I mean, what other sport can you say it's just a grind like that? In the NFL, every game matters, which is great. I mean, it's a whole different dynamic, but when you only play 16 games, I mean, losing one game can, I mean, ruin your entire season. I think in
Yeah.
baseball, it's a little more of an accurate reflection of your team and your organization and how you're run overall because you're not just going on a hot stretch. I mean, you were the best team for months and months and months.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and that's why baseball is my favorite sport. It's a whole nother grind, 160 plus games of just, let's have what kind of strategy are we going to plan for this month, and all right, who do we have? You don't really look forward from April to September as you would in football from September to December. You know what I mean? So I mean, it's definitely two different atmospheres, and I couldn't see baseball being a shortened season. After this season, of course, I don't see them shortening it in the future.
Yeah, I really hope not. I know one of those things
Yeah.
that a lot of baseball purists, I was reading a few blogs and articles this morning. I know a lot of them are concerned about what happens, for example, if somebody hits 400 this season. Then all of a sudden we say they hit 400 for a season, and it's the first time that's happened since Ted Williams. So, but it's tainted. So it's one of those things that I know people are
Mm-hmm.
concerned about records being tainted. And to go along on the opposite side, let's say Mike Trout has a really hot start to the season and he
Mm-hmm.
through 60 games has hit 30 home runs. That's crazy, but so it would put him on a pace to break the all-time record. We'll never know if he was actually ever able to break the record. You're left
Yeah.
with a lot of what ifs, and baseball above any other sport, and we've seen it with sabermetrics, has been very driven by statistical analysis and just even record books. It's the sport that has the longest history, so we look at the impact of hitting 400 and hitting 500 home runs and 300 wins, 3,000 strikeouts. There's all these milestones, and to
Yeah.
see it's hard to compare a 60 game season versus what's normally 162. So, I'm really hoping that, and to go along those lines as well. If you're looking at Cy Youngs, if Jacob DeGrom wins his third consecutive Cy Young, I mean, it's a little tainted in a 60 game season. As much as that is still a huge accomplishment, I mean, it just doesn't mean as much as if there was a full season. And are we going to have we talked about rookies probably not getting as much of an opportunity, but how many rookies are actually going to get enough playing time to be rookie of the year? Are they going to have a rookie of the year award? There's so many questions in that realm as well. So I'm interested to see how it shakes out.
Oh, exactly. And this whole season has the asterisk behind on it. You said about all the awards players would
Barry
get,
Bonds.
etc. Even the World Series champion is going to have an asterisk by it. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm just ready for this season to get underway and see what happens. And just likely we have baseball and really get excited for 2021, if anything, if we have
I
a
was
season then too.
saying that the other night when I was at dinner with my father-in-law. He said, "Oh, are the Mets going to make the playoffs in the shortened season?" I said, "I guarantee you that the Mets are going to win the World Series this year because it's tainted. This will be the year that they finally bring a World Series back, one that isn't as meaningful."
Hey, it's a World Series though.
Yeah.
If my Nats win it back to back, I mean, hell yeah. I mean, I'll definitely embrace it. Tainted, yes, but I'll embrace it.
I mean, I always said that if they had an opportunity to clinch a World Series, I was going to go to that game in my lifetime. So if I can't go to that, I'm going to be so angry.
I would be upset for sure.
But yeah, I mean, so overall, I guess just kind of reviewing everything in terms of drafts. we are targeting veteran guys, specifically offensive veteran guys. Not to say that veteran pitchers don't have value, and I still think they have an advantage because they've been through the grind of a season, and maybe they don't need spring training as much, because even the spring training, they're not facing live batters. I haven't heard any talks
Mm-hmm.
of actually live spring training games. They're just going through actual training camps. So those guys realistically don't need any spring training. And some of these young guys were fighting for roster spots and working on new pitches, and a lot of that's going to be impacted. So I still think veteran
Yeah.
pitchers do have an advantage, but some of those younger pitchers also that haven't been stretched out, I'm recommending you target a guy like Chris Paddock, who was probably going to have an inning limit of 150 to 160. I mean, now he's pitching the full season, no questions asked, and he could be a dominant force for a 60-game season. So I think those are the two overarching themes for me. Anything else that you want to wrap up or follow up on?
I mean, I think that's it. I think you kind of nailed it. I would definitely target the younger pitcher as well. Young pitching, veteran hitting. That's going to be my motto this season.
Yep, I agree. So I appreciate you guys watching. This has been another episode of Doc and Dog presented by the Fantasy Mafia. If you don't already, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. We have lots of great content going up on there. Our website is alive with lots of great content coming out 7 days a week, and that's at thefantasymafia.com. And if you don't already, make sure you like us on Facebook. So, once again, we appreciate you guys watching, and we will see you next time.
We'll see you later.